It's kinda in the word, isn't it? Spin-off. It spins off from the main path and does its own little thing. And usually that means it also is not meant to be taken as canon to whatever the main games are like. And sometimes it barely has its own canon. I doubt Pokemon Smile has lore, for example. But when it comes to the bigger Pokemon spin-offs, there's actually a very interesting pattern going on, where despite these other series clearly being spin-offs, including the fact that Game Freak has nothing to do with them, effort is still put in to ensure it ties into the somewhat established Pokemon canon. Because yes, even that can be shaky, already consisting of multiple timelines, but it still exists, and surprisingly enough, there are actually quite a long list of Pokemon spin-offs that interact with it in interesting ways. But before I tell you all about that, I have to bring up another very surprising, but most definitely exciting collaboration. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are coming to Raid Shadow Legends. Yes, I am dead serious. Raid and Paramount are teaming up to bring my second favorite childhood cartoon after, you know, the one I made a channel for, to the game as legendary champions, and it all looks as crazy and fun as it sounds. And all you have to do to get in on this is download the game, using my QR code preferably, and log in for 7 days in order to get your hands on Michelangelo. You can find Donatello by fusing, summon for Leonardo, Raphael, April and Shredder, and even face off against the villain himself in a special event. Collect all 6 of them and you get a special bonus reward. Now, if you're ready to jump in, I really recommend downloading the game using my QR code or the link in the description and comments to get powerful bonuses, such as the epic champion Tayrel, only one of the best in the game, another pack with epic Rector Drath when you reach level 15, and you can pick one of the promo codes on screen now to unlock a legendary champion free of charge. I would advise you to get Sun Wukong, he's unmatched. Make sure you download the game using my custom link or QR though, otherwise the code won't work. I've been trying the game out myself and I'm really impressed with it. If you're familiar with Pokemon, you'll have no problem getting used to it. Guaranteed. Plus, if you're a loyal viewer, you'd be supporting me completely free of charge to help make more videos. You can even find me under the name Pedia Man and join my clan, the Pedia Gang. So give it a try and cowabunga to Raid Shadow Legends for their support. And now it's time to talk about some Pokemon spin-offs. Although, I feel like I have to start with what most people actually refer to as side series rather than full-on spin-offs, mostly because they retain some semblance of what defines the mainline Pokemon game, if those other titles have zero involvement from Game Freak. So, that last part also means that the Legends games are not part of this. They're not spin-offs, they're not even side series, they're Game Freak developed and to be considered mainline games, even if I do think we need a separate word to discern between actual new generations and these Legends games. But alas, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm referring to the 2 GameCube titles set in Ore, Pokémon Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness. I frequently get people in my comments saying I should include these 2 when I talk about every Pokémon game. That's how much people associate these games with the mainline series. Personally, I think that's a bridge too far. Game Freak has never had a hand in their development, unlike every game that is to be considered mainline. Instead, these titles were developed by Genius Sonority, which is owned by the Pokémon Company, to be fair, and currently develops Pokémon Cafe Mix, which is not canon, if you're wondering. But are the Ore titles? Well, first of all, for anyone who hasn't played them yet, let's make it very clear that if one is, so is the other. XD is a direct sequel to Colosseum, so this is a situation where either both are canon or neither is. And while the tone and setting of this game is very different from what we see in the mainline titles, there is actually quite a lot of reason to suggest that Ore is somewhere on the same planet as Sinnoh, Kalos, Galar, you name it. Most definitely the biggest lead is the way they connect to the mainline games. Pokemon obtained, snagged as it's called here, in Ore can be sent to the Gen 3 games, so the Hoenn titles and Fire Red and Leaf Green, and from there can even be sent up all the way to Scarlet and Violet if you so choose. Their ribbons, obtained in Ore, are even still valid to this day. For example, the Earth ribbon, obtained by beating Mount Battle, is still honored in Scarlet and Violet, giving your Pokemon a special title, the 100 times Victorious, and the same applies to the ribbon obtained by purifying a Pokemon, the National ribbon, which grants the title of the Triumphant. That alone essentially confirms the Ore games are canon. I mean, literal Pokemon and the ribbons attached to them as obtained and seen in this world can be brought over to the mainline games. It doesn't get more rock solid than that. There is also another piece of more speculative evidence to be found in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. There's a house in Juford Town that has a map of the Pokemon world on the wall, and this map is actually created by Joe Merrick, the webmaster of Cerebi, a site I'm sure you're familiar with. It had been on his website for decades when it suddenly appeared in this game, effectively making it canon now, assuming at least the person who put it there realized what it actually was. Because on the map, Merrick has included ore, and as such, a piece of the desert region has made it into the final game, implying that at the very least, ore exists on the same planet as Oraz's version of Hoenn at the very least. Now, I doubt we'll ever see Game Freak making an explicit reference to this region in a mainline game again, but hey, maybe if the Switch 2 NSO versions do well, that might change. But for now, as long as we don't get a region that specifically replaces Ore's presumed location of Arizona, it can be assumed to be set on the canonical Poke Earth. But Ore isn't the only spin-off represented on Cerebi's map, and therefore Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Also visible are Fior, Almia and Oblivia, the settings of the free Pokémon Ranger games. That's definitely a promising start, and what makes it even better is that unlike the GameCube games, which were developed by Genius Sonority, which may be Pokémon Company owned but has nothing to do with the mainline series, Ranger is developed by Creatures, who do own a third of the series and have been involved in the franchise ever since its founding. And while they are not super hands-on with the main games, mostly handling 3D modeling rather than actual story content for example, the simple fact they are behind this adds some legitimacy to the idea that these 3 regions are located on the familiar Pokemon world. There is however also much more explicit evidence, and it's not exactly unknown. It's probably the thing the Ranger games are best remembered for nowadays, the Manaphy Egg. Just like the Ore games, the original Pokemon Ranger is compatible with Pokemon Diamond, Pearl and Platinum. It was even called Pokemon Ranger The Road to Diamond and Pearl during development, and allows you to transfer this Manaphy Egg to the main series games. Guardian Signs, the last Ranger game, also had events that allow you to send over a Manaphy Egg, as well as a Deoxys, a Heatran and Shaymin. While there are no ribbons commemorated as recently as Scarlet and Violet, it is very important to note that during several of these missions, the destination of Sinnoh is mentioned by name, and even alludes to the Pokemon being sent to trainers, essentially confirming that the Ranger titles take place on the established Pokemon Earth and are aware of the existence of other regions with other customs. And in case you're wondering and have never played it, just like Colosseum and XD, the 3 Pokemon Ranger games are all connected and make references to another, confirming that as long as one is connected to Sinnoh and the rest of the Pokemon world, so is the rest. These 2 spin-offs are probably the ones you most associate with being canon, if you've ever looked into this topic before, but the list is actually longer, and at this point even includes several games developed by companies that have nothing to do with Game Freak, Creatures or the Pokemon Company. The first, and honestly, the one that kind of forced its way into the main series due to sheer popularity, is Pokémon Go. It should go without saying that the real world setting of this game doesn't exactly lend itself to being placed on a Pokémon timeline or planet, but that hasn't stopped Niantic from shoving as many references to the main series games in here as they were allowed to the point there are too many for me to even name them all. Team Rocket is in this game for example, canon characters like Giovanni included, as well as Professor Oak, Jacques and more. Meltan and Melmetal hail from this game, to the point their region of origin is still considered unknown. You can send Pokemon caught in Go to the mainline games, either via home or directly in Let's Go, further establishing the events of Go as canon, and there are plenty of items from the mainline games that appear in Go, as well as vice versa, items from Go that later appear in mainline games. I do want to point out that while Go also has Shadow Pokemon, just like the Ore games, these are actually not the same thing, as their Japanese names are different. The Go variant is called Shadow in both English and Japanese, but in Ore, Shadow Pokemon are Dark Pokemon in their original language. But hey, Go does appear to be connected to the main Pokemon world in some bizarre, other dimension kinda way, and that world probably houses Ore still, so they're all connected after all. Another mobile game that heavily relies on canon material in order to essentially justify its existence is Pokémon Masters EX. This is developed by DNA, so once again a partner of Nintendo, but definitely not in the position to make big calls about the Pokémon franchise, but that hasn't stopped them from toying with canonicity in interesting ways. The premise of this game is that every character summoned to the island of Pasio is in fact pulled from their canon world, and has gone through everything that canonically happens in the mainline Pokemon games. However, what happens on Pasio stays on Pasio, and since Hoopa and its dimensional shenanigans are responsible for the summonings, it is to be believed that Pasio is not in fact on the actual Pokemon world. Furthermore, I'm pretty sure that every character in Masters comes from their version of a Pokemon world where the events of the games have already happened, or at least the story events as they happen in said timeline, which can include villains winning, have transpired, meaning that not a single character from the mainline games has visited Pasio prior to their appearance in the main story. Still with me? To simplify this all a bit, it means that every character in Pokemon Masters has lived through their original timeline, and as such has canon knowledge and experience, which Masters occasionally expands on in ways we never see in-game but are presumably canon. However, what happens on Pasio, say Red, Blue and Leaf teaming up for the Pokemon Masters League, is not canon to the mainline Pokemon games. Confusing, perhaps, but maybe not too surprising if you've ever dived into Pokemon Masters. But next up, I want to talk about a couple of games that are most certainly surprising and how confirmed they are, even if a canon connection isn't exactly easy to make from a logical standpoint. Pokemon Dream Radar essentially has the Golden Trinity. It's made by Game Freak, it features Pokemon you can send to the mainline games, and a character from it even reappeared in the mainline games, Professor Burnett. How exactly though an AR game that takes place wherever you are when you play it could ever also take place on the Pokemon world is a little unclear, but fortunately the game does enough to keep things vague by introducing the Inter-Dream Zone, a world in between dreams and reality as Burnett calls it. Pokemon Quest is another very odd one. This game too is developed by Game Freak, a good sign, although it doesn't connect to the main series games directly. However, we do know for a fact that it is canon to the Pokemon world in a super unique way. In the Isle of Armor DLC of Sword and Shield, Mustard can be found playing Pokemon Quest, confirming that while it is canon to the mainline games, it is a video game here as well. Maybe our world and the Pokemon world are more alike than we thought and Go really was onto something. There are also several other games that connect to the mainline Pokemon games, suggesting they are, to some extent, canon, at least in a sense that they canonically can connect to the main Pokemon world, but don't really seem to have a story or even world to speak of. This includes titles like Pokemon Box, My Pokemon Ranch and Pokemon Home, where some of the characters even have ties to canonical ones, like Haley, who runs the Pokemon Ranch, being a friend of BB, the PSS developer we meet in the Sinnoh games. Pokemon Unite features a random but cool appearance of 5 canonical trainers in an event known as the Legacy Trainer Showdown. Included here are Cynthia, Corinna, Raihan, Leon and Green. There is however zero story affiliated with this event, nor is there any explanation on how this could happen, so all we can say about it is that the world of Unite and the main setting of Eos Island do connect to the canon Poke-Earth in some fashion. They aren't one and the same though. It's said in Unite that the Unite battles are watched all over the world, which would then mean that if that world was the same one as we know from the mainline games, we would have probably heard about it by now. There are also the 2 Stadium games, which are more retellings of the events of their respective generational games rather than anything original, as well as Pokemon Battle Revolution, which doesn't have a story, but does have a unique location, Poketopia, with several original characters that can thus be assumed to at least tie into the main games to some extent, even if the world of Pokemon Battle Revolution, so to speak, is merely an alternate dimension of the main Pokemon planet. It should be said though that through that lens, one of alternate dimensions and timelines, it is technically possible for every single spin-off to be canon in their own way. No one can tell you Pokemon Mystery Dungeon isn't an alternate dimension of the established Pokemon world, even if there is zero reason to assume that is canonically the case. But one more spin-off series appears to possibly be tied to the mainline Pokemon games, albeit in a way that is so roundabout that it might be better to just chalk it off as a series of nods rather than canon. I am talking about Pokemon Snap, both games of which are undeniably linked to the anime. The main character of the N64 original, Todd Snap, as well as this version of Professor Oak, appear in both the game and the anime, confirming a connection, and the Switch sequel, New Pokemon Snap, has direct ties to the Pokemon movie Secrets of the Jungle, with stills from the film appearing in Professor Mira's lab, and the original characters Rita and Phil making a cameo in the movie. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're also canon to the mainline games. However, There are quite some connections between the Ash-focused anime and the mainline games, although they are loose and more event-based. There is the Cat Pikachu of course, as well as Sun and Moon's Ash Greninja event, which does suggest that, to some extent at least, the anime world is connected to the games, although something akin to an alternate universe feels more likely than a direct connection. As such, technically speaking, the world of Pokemon Snap, which is connected by the way, as Dot Snap appears in new Pokemon Snap as well, does have some far, indirect ties to the main Pokemon world. It's not much, it's very circumstantial, but it's definitely better than what say Mystery Dungeon or Pokepark have going for it. And that has been everything that makes up the complicated and inconsistent Pokemon canon. Or do you have other ideas or theories about what can be considered part of the Pokemon canon? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. Don't forget to check out Raid Shadow Legends with a link in the description to support me even more, and for now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.